All right, what's up, guys? So today's going to be a little bit more fun, I believe, because it's going to be a little bit more practical. So the off season is coming up soon. I believe in 2 to 3 weeks, our athletes will be returning. And just I wanted to talk about something just because uh, I thought about it when I was watching one of Louis Simmons' old seminars. And the reason that it made me think about it was because I was listening to what Louis was saying, and it got me thinking about why do people think that his conjugate system is too advanced for, let's say, beginner athletes. All right. And if you've read or studied any of Louis' stuff, you must have stumbled upon the rule of three, which is basically 3 years of GPP work. So if you look at it, his system is geared towards beginner athletes. But the reason why it kind of inspired me to do this video was because I had written an article talking about Thibaudeau's Omni Contraction system. And I kind of, gave a little description of it and different ways that you may use it for athletics. And then I had a couple of questions regarding its use for beginners. And I talked with a couple other coaches, and the consensus seems to be that it's too advanced for beginner athletes, which respectfully I kind of disagree. It's almost like saying that the school system is too advanced. Well, schooling is not necessarily too advanced. It's just the way it's programmed and adapted for the individual that may be more advanced. So in my opinion, any system there's no such thing as being too advanced or too hard for someone. It's just the way that you apply the system and the principles to the specific athlete that may make it too advanced. All right. So yes, if you're doing the conjugate system, you have a beginner athlete and you're maxing out singles and change exercises every time, adding too much band tension. Yes, it's too advanced, but if you look at the conjugate system as a whole, it's talking about building a base, building a general physical preparedness base, building maximal strength and dynamic strength or rate of force development, which is basically for every sport, no matter what age. So again, I want to reiterate, any system there is, in my opinion, can be adapted to any level of athlete. So I just kind of wanted to give an example of, let's say, something I may use with a beginner athlete. So if you've read any of Christian's stuff, or you read his book that describes the system or took his course, you'll see that he uses a lot of, let's say, advanced techniques or exercises, such as depth jumps and specific barbell exercises that require a sufficient amount of strength. However, if you have a beginner athlete that doesn't have this strength, or let's say the motor coordination or efficiency of movement to perform those exercises, well, then yes, it's too advanced. But I think if you look at what I've kind of laid out here and kind of what I plan on doing with one of my athletes, you'll realize that, the principles are there, but it's been adapted to say a beginner athlete. So accumulation one, very structural based. So if you're looking at the ratio of amount of work or strengths worked, it's primarily structural balance, hypertrophy work. Maybe a little bit of strength. They will get stronger just because they're in a detrained state, but it's not really training emphasizing strength, at least in the for a beginner athlete. So the eccentric method, maybe just a slow eccentric, performing split squat in 4 seconds, performing a unilateral leg curl in 4 seconds. All right. We do that already with all our athletes. So in terms of advanced, I don't believe it's too advanced. The isometric method, maybe a yielding isometric, specifically in the stretch position, to kind of work on mobility and strengthening the ligaments and tendons in those stretched ranges. So again, a Poliquin split squat with maybe a pause at the bottom position to really stretch out the hip flexors and the ankle, because that seems to be a common issue with hockey players. Then the concentric method, it doesn't have to be purely eccentric or concentric. So it doesn't just have to be sleds. For athlete X, they need a little bit more muscle mass, especially since they're still considered a beginner athlete. So, performing a lot of hypertrophy work, machine-based work, the dumbbells, and using a 2 to 3 second tempo. So if you're looking at maybe a higher time under tension, the reps may be up into the 12 to 15 range and potentially higher. All right. But that day is more focused on, let's say, a lot of machine-based and kind of, classic bodybuilding work. And in the original system, Christian lays out 3 days with a gap day. So it's basically eccentric, isometric, concentric, and then a gap day. What I've kind of done is, beginner athletes, they recover very well because the stimulus isn't that great. So instead of having 3 days and like a gap day, I do 4 days, but I keep the eccentric and the isometric day full body. And then there would be a concentric lower body and then a concentric upper body, just because they tend to need a little bit more volume to get that hypertrophy stimulus. So we move on to intensification 1. Now, this is where we introduce some bilateral exercises. So like let's say a bench press or a barbell bench press, a barbell squat. So for the eccentric day, I would stick to a 4-second eccentric, but because the exercise is changed to something more that requires a lot more loading, or that the athlete is able to produce a greater, say, stimulus, well, I don't have to change the method too much. Simply by changing the exercise, the intensity will dramatically increase. Then the isometric method, I'm a big fan of the statodynamic method, or static dynamic method. And one way that I've kind of been toying around with its, let's say, level of difficulty is the number of positions that the athlete needs to, let's say, pause in. So I actually had a couple 13-year-olds do this method, but they only included 2 pauses. They would pause halfway on the eccentric and then in the bottom position. All right. But since this athlete is a little bit more advanced and a little bit stronger, what I may do is include a 3rd position. So let's say, and again, I'm a big fan of increased intensity during a phase. So week 1, maybe an eccentric pause halfway, a pause halfway down the eccentric, a pause in the bottom, and a pause halfway up the concentric. Week 2, to increase the intensity and the load, there may be a pause, a 1/3 of the way down eccentric, halfway down the eccentric, in the bottom position, and then no pause on the concentric. And then the last week, it may be a 1/4 of the way down, halfway down, 3/4 of the way down, and then they use the stretch reflex in the bottom to finish the rep. So with that, the weight is just naturally going to increase because the difficulty of the pauses decreases. Then finally, the concentric day would be focused on strength, kind of like in the 4 to 6 rep range. Since we're still kind of far from the start of the season, the reps can be a little bit higher. But if you look at kind of the ratio of strength to hypertrophy work, the slow eccentric and the isometric days may be more hypertrophy based, with a higher time under tension. And then the concentric days, again, a lower body and upper body, may be more focused on strength. So again, the principles of the system are still incorporated, but they're toyed around with a little bit to fit what this athlete needs. Then we go back to accumulation 2. Now, we may stick with the same exercise as intensification 1, but we increase the time under tension. So the eccentric method may be a super slow eccentric, something in the 6 to 8 second range. So again, because I like to increase intensity, week 1, maybe 8 seconds, week 2, 7 seconds, week 3, 6 seconds. So naturally the weight will increase while keeping the reps the same. Isometric, maybe a yielding isometric. I'm a little undecided on how I should or where the pause should be. So, hockey players, they don't spend much time in the bottom of a squat while they're skating. So what I may do is have them pause for a 3 to 4 second count in like the mid range, so around parallel, and then use the stretch reflex at the bottom to finish the rep. In the concentric method, one day for the lower body, because we are getting closer to the season, maybe something more focused on transferring strength to power or to speed. So it may be a contrast method, whether it be transfer strength or transfer sport. I'm kind of leaning more towards a transfer of strength. So let's say on a contrast, maybe you have a deadlift, a heavy deadlift or a heavy rack pull paired with, a power clean from the hang, all right? Something that's really strength focused, but you're kind of teaching the athlete to transfer that strength into power. And then finally, since the upper body, still needs a lot of muscular development, the upper body may be more functional hypertrophy based. So if you look at kind of the whole of that program, you'd have about 3 days focused on strength, functional hypertrophy, and then 1 day focused really on starting the athlete to get them prepared for the season. Now, finally, the most important phase, the intensification 2. All right, this athlete has and is able to deal with overspeed eccentrics. So using bands attached to the bar is something that they're able to handle with, and it's not too stressful. Obviously, because they're a beginner athlete, I'm not going to be putting on 120 pounds if tension. Just enough tension to where they feel the bar pulling on them. So, if depending on what they need at the specific time, if they need a little bit more speed and if their strength has really developed, the overspeed eccentric may be more of like a dynamic effort day. But what I'm guessing right now is this athlete will still need some strength. So this day may still be like a heavier day, but we are using the bands as accommodating resistance. Then the isometric day could be used as a contrast method again, so a transfer day. So using an overcoming isometric, not to necessarily gain strength, but to potentiate jumps or a strength movement afterwards. So one of my favorites is, let's say, a split squat, an overcoming isometric split squat. So they push against the bar in a split squat position, 3 to 5 seconds, as hard as they can. Take a little second, do the other leg, and then go immediately into split squat jumps or lateral bounding, something biomechanically similar to their sport. Then the concentric day, we would have 1 day, kind of like another strength-based day. So something more in the 3 to 5 rep range. I would say this would be more of a full body workout. So let's say a trap bar deadlift or a barbell squat, something that they're very proficient in, something that they're strong in, something to create a very strong strength stimulus. And then let's say for upper body, it may be chin ups and bench press, whatever. Day 2 would be, again, another transfer day because we are getting close to the season. So we need to transfer all the gains in strength from the previous 9 weeks into power and speed. So this day may be a partial movement paired with jumps, similar to the overcoming isometric. So, a barbell pin split squat, a barbell rack pull, and then paired with an overhead med ball toss, broad jumps, whatever. Just, the focus isn't necessarily on a specific contraction, but it's more so specific to a strength quality that we want to train. So if you kind of look at this whole plan, this beginning plan that I've laid out for one of my athletes, if you look, it's not too, in my opinion, it's not too advanced. Yes, I know my athlete very well, and I know what they can handle. But if you look at this compared to, let's say, another program, there's no eccentric hooks, so there's no super maximal eccentrics. A full day of plyometrics or pure speed work is not necessarily what this athlete needs at this point. But what you see is that it's, again, the basic principles of the system, working each contraction and emphasizing them, working on strength, transferring the speed. That is what this whole system is basically designed to do. What you decide or how you decide to use it, or which methods and exercises or little accessories you decide to implement, that really dictates how advanced a program may be. So again, there's no such thing as a system that's too advanced. Only the way it's adapted to that athlete may it be too advanced. So I hope you guys liked it. If you're a strength coach, again, I would highly recommend checking out Thibaudeau stuff. It was really eye-opening when I started learning about it, and it's really kind of shaped the way I think about my programs now. But if you have any questions, if you completely disagree with me or you disagree with me on anything, please let me know. I'm always open to criticism, to questioning, to interrogation. That's what's beautiful about this job, is we're able to communicate and exchange ideas so that we ultimately formulate our own opinions, even if it doesn't go along with everybody else's. So if you guys have anything to say, just let me know, and we'll see you next time. All right, see you guys.